Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit record. So we are recording now. So if you'll go ahead and get that project submitted, and then if whoever wants to go ahead and start, let's go ahead and jump on in.
Good afternoon, Professor, and welcome to Group 1 presentation on the backend database SQL Server. I am Sivakumar, and I have Angela, Matthew, and Kevin in our group for the discussion. Next slide, please. So this is our agenda for the day. We wanted to just give a brief introduction about the database, the SQL Server. Wanted to take you through the additions that we have for SQL Server, some architecture, some technical specifications, what features are in the 2016, which is the latest version, what's the perception from the user community, and what's the scalability and comparison, and then we'll open up for questions. So moving right along. So just want to introduce what is the database and what is the database management system before we get into SQL Server. There are several definitions for database. In simple, it is nothing but a data structure to store information. The data is well organized in such a way it is easy for retrieval and updates. There are few types of databases. Of those, relation is very popular, the most common one. Some examples are the Oracle, Microsoft, SQL Server, IBM's DB2, Sybase, ASE. In the relational database, data is stored in tables in the form of rows and columns. The other terms that is very popular in the database world is the RDBMS, which is called nothing but the Relational Database Management System. It's nothing but a software package designed to store, modify, and extract information from a database. An enterprise version of all RDBMS, including server, is available along with all the RDBMS or popular databases. So now let's see the evolution of Microsoft SQL Server. So over a period of time, I think the product has evolved and shaped up very well, but just a little bit of history. Microsoft, along with Sybase, they released the SQL Server in 1988, which is designed for OS/2 platform. But the partnership ended in 1994. Microsoft came up with the original version of SQL Server 6 in 1995. I personally have my acquaintance with SQL Server since that version, and I'm a certified Microsoft certified professional on a 6.5 version. So looking at the features, the SQL Server 2000 was Microsoft's most prominent release with some notable changes, including XML support, performance and stability improvement, query analyzer improvements, and data warehouse and BI support in that version. With the SQL Server 2005, Microsoft introduced SQL Server Integration Services and the new SQL Server Management Studio, which is a robust and a powerful replacement for both Enterprise Manager and Analysis Manager. The SQL Server 2005 also introduced a report builder in this version. The 2010 has, in the year 2010, Microsoft introduced SQL Server 2008 R2, which actually included the integration of Microsoft Office products and a self-service of BI strategies, which is including a Power Pivot for Excel and SharePoint. This version, the 2008 R2 version, introduced master data services. That's the master data management solution for consolidating disparate information across the enterprise into a centralized location or repository of clean and accurate data. The 2012 SQL Server 2012 introduced something called data quality management on top of the master data services. This actually allows the user to perform data quality tasks such as correcting, standardizing, and enriching the data. In addition to that, database engine supported the column store index, which is based off X velocity and advanced in-memory storage and compression technology. The column format actually forms the index, offering improved performance for queries over large quantities of data. Some notable changes in 2014 are, the hybrid is optimized, hybrid cloud is optimized, and they also introduced a cloud for BI. and also there are improvements along performance and stability. So while we wait to see the features of 2016 in the latest slides, I will now turn it over to Angela. Angela?
Thank you, Shiva. SQL Server offers the right additions to meet any business need. The Enterprise Edition is for mission-critical applications and business intelligence systems, as well as data warehousing. It delivers comprehensive high-end data center capabilities for demanding database and business intelligence requirements. The Business Intelligence Edition is for self-service and corporate business intelligence. It empowers organizations to be able to build and deploy secure, scalable, and manageable self-service corporate BI solutions. The Standard Edition is for the basic database reporting and analytics capabilities. It's going to be able to provide core data management and business intelligence capabilities for non-critical workloads with minimal IT resources. There is also an Express Edition that we don't have outlined here on the slide that is free, and it's basically ideal for developing and powering desktop, web, and small server applications. Moving on to our processor, memory, and operating system requirements. The minimum for SQL Server is the minimum is 1 gig of memory and at least a 1.4 gigahertz processor. Other than the Express, which does allow you to have a minimum of 512 meg. They do recommend at least 4 gig of memory, and that will increase as your database size increases so that you have optimal performance from your database. They also recommend that the processor speed be around a 2.0 gigahertz or faster. With the newer edition of SQL Server becoming available, one thing that we should note is that the new edition does not support the x86 processors. Now I'm going to hand it over to Kevin to discuss the database architecture.
What we wanted to do here with the database architecture is kind of bring our first project in and show how this ties in to our first project. What we have here is basically the architecture. It shows that request flows through the web browser, through the firewall, actually through the web server, which could be the Apache open options or the Apple server, through the application base, and then actually hits the SQL Server. When it hits the SQL Server, there is two different things. There's the security and the query processing. The security part actually checks to make sure that the person requesting it has the security permissions to go and request that data. And then once that data is cleared the security process, it hits the query processor. The query processor actually isolates the user from the details of the execution. The user specifies the results, and the query processor determines how these results are going to be obtained. There are actually two major phases of query processing. There is query optimization and query execution. Query optimization is the process of choosing the fastest execution path. What is the fastest way to get the data and the fastest path to get that data? And the query execution is actually where it executes that and goes out and gets that data. And then depending upon where that data is stored, as you can see down at the bottom, there are three different data storage types. There's directly connected, there's a network area storage, and then you can also have a file-based storage or a cloud storage solution. So now we'll turn it back over to Angela to talk about the technical specifications of SQL Server.
Thank you, Kevin. The technical specifications for SQL Server are outlined here on the slide. It's also recommended that you run SQL Server on computers with the new technology file system in TFS file format. When installing SQL Server on computers with a FAT32 file system, it is going to be supported, but it's not recommended because it's less secure than the other file system. SQL Server startup is going to block installations on read-only, mapped, or compressed drives. And the installation of SQL Server fails if you launch the setup through Terminal Services Client, as it's not supported. SQL Server Management Studio installation requires installing the .NET 4.6 as its prerequisite. It will automatically do this install when you select the SQL Server Management Studio as the installation choice. SQL Server Setup installs the following software components, which are by the product. They are the SQL Server native client and the SQL Server setup supports. Moving on to the cost. We've outlined the cost for SQL Server 2014 here as the cost for 2016 were not readily available at this time. But one thing that you have to remember is on the cost that it is going to be per core for the pricing. And as far as maintenance and troubleshooting costs, that's going to depend on the company's needs, whether they need to outsource the support or they are going to do it in-house. The cost will reflect those decisions. Now Kevin will discuss security considerations with SQL Server.
One of the basic things to remember when you're running security on the SQL Server installation is always run the SQL service by using the lowest possible permissions, and then associate each different SQL service with the lowest privileged Windows user account or domain user account that you can. Don't try to tie all those services into one user account. Separate those out into different service accounts for each one. For the authentication mode, you make sure you require Windows authentication for all connections to SQL, and also make sure you use Kerberos authentication. One thing to remember when you use Kerberos authentication, it is a time-based authentication method, and so you'll need to make sure that all your servers are using the latest in NTS server or network time server so that they can all have the same time and the permissions will run across. As far as your passwords, your security account needs to have a strong password, and always enable password checking for both strengths and expiration, and always use a strong password for all SQL Server logins. And now we'll turn it back over to Shiva to talk about the SQL Server 2016 features.
Thank you, Kevin. I'll now highlight some unique features of SQL Server 2016 along with all features that we saw in 2014, the pre-year versions. There are some improvements made in 2016. First one is enhanced in-memory support, which is, I mentioned about the column and store index based on X-Velocity technology. This actually provides at least up to 30 times faster transactions, more than 100 times faster queries than disk-based relational databases and real-time operational analytics. Other features include the faster hybrid backups, high availability as a new feature, disaster recovery scenarios to backup and restore the active databases. I want to highlight the high availability. High availability is like a high-end solution these days, as web application is expected to be available around the clock. In fact, I even had an opportunity to implement the solution using Oracle database for the portfolio system that I actually manage. So that's a very cool feature. Always encrypted technology. Again, security is everything. This technology provides your data at rest and motion, whether it's in the cloud or it's in the active database. The master key always sits in the application, and access to the encrypted data is only available for the application calling the SQL Server. So that's a productive feature. Next slide, please. So if you're continuing on the features of 2016, other features include the built-in advanced analytics, actually that provides scalability and performance benefits. Not only the active database, but also on the cloud databases actually supports the BI solution. That's another feature added. Stretch database is a new technology introduced. It's a method to stretch the storage on the on-premise database or the active database to the Azure SQL database. The stretch database feature allows to have the most frequently used data in the active database, while the less access data in the offsite Azure database, which is the cloud. Again, this is, these are some of the few key features that's available in 2016. I will now turn it over to Matthew to give us an overview of the perception among the user community. Matthew?
Perception of Microsoft's SQL Server, we did a word analysis using word cloud tools, and that generated the word cloud here. It sizes the different words that are most commonly used based on frequency. So the bigger the word, the more often it's used for customer reviews. So you can see that very popular things, aside from everybody says it's Microsoft and that it's a database, are services are a top word that the market perceives. It's a top pick for queries, and its competitor is Oracle. So there are a lot of reviews that compare Microsoft SQL Server to Oracle database. And next I'm going to show some of the screens available for use with Microsoft SQL Server. Part of the reason that it's so popular is that there's an interface for every flavor of business. Microsoft SQL Server includes command prompt for all host operating systems, so you can install and command everything in Microsoft SQL Server from the command line if you desire. It's most commonly used with Unix interface. It also includes a wide range of graphical interfaces for users who prefer to see a picture. Such things as Database Designer allow you to drag and drop components to test interaction between database technology tools in a graphical window, so you can see the various functions and the various objects that the code would actually be interacting with. SQL Developer is another tool that's commonly included with Microsoft SQL Server. This allows you to write, test, and execute queries on a database itself. And it also includes graphical analysis of your query if you use the execution plan interface shown here on the bottom. The next discussion will be scalability and data recovery. Data recovery for Microsoft SQL Server is most popularly addressed using storage area network and virtualization, where the SQL database is copied in real time to several locations, and SAN technology provides the option of near real-time data recovery and failover if one SQL server goes down. Scalability-wise, if you need to increase the amount of storage in your database, Microsoft SQL Server includes technology to scale directly into the Microsoft Azure cloud, which provides scalability all the way to petabytes of data for the Enterprise Edition, and uses massive parallel processing architecture to process the high volume of data. The response time for scaling into the cloud is in minutes. So if you suddenly have an influx of business for an application, you can scale up to meet the need almost as fast as it arises. And I will be followed by Kevin to discuss some of the pros and cons of Microsoft SQL and its competitor, Oracle.
What we wanted to do here is go ahead and compare some of the differences and similarities between Oracle and SQL. Oracle is the major competition for SQL Server in the marketplace. The three main differences between SQL and Oracle are language, transaction control, and the organization of database objects. The differences in the language is that SQL uses a transact SQL, which is an extension of SQL originally wrote by Sybase and used by Microsoft. Oracle uses a procedural languages. These are just different dialects of a SQL language. The second change is the transaction control. A transaction can be identified as a group of operations or tasks that should be treated as a single unit. Transaction control differences are that Microsoft SQL Server will execute and commit each command and task individually. It will be difficult or nearly impossible to roll back changes if an error occurred along the way. With Oracle, each new database connection is treated as a new transaction, and as queries are executed or commands are issued, Changes are only made in memory and nothing is committed until an explicit commit statement is given. Microsoft SQL Server organizes all objects and tables, objects such as tables, views, and procedures by database name. In Oracle, all the database objects are grouped by schemas, which are a subset collection of database objects, and all database objects are shared among the schemas and users. Some of the similarities of the licensing structure: both Oracle and SQL Server are licensed by a processor, and they use a tiered licensing structure. Another similarity is they are both created on the language of C++, and they are both RDBMSs, or relational database managers. In the next slide, we wanted to show you some of the different businesses that are using SQL Server. SQL Server right now has about a 46% market share. And right now, of course, Microsoft is using it, but some people like NASA, Bank of America, even Ferrari uses this SQL Server for their infrastructure. And then the last slide, we wanted to go ahead and talk about some of the things that we learned. So what I'm going to do is talk about closing comments for each of us and what we learned. What I learned about SQL Server during this project was, having not worked with it much in the past, I learned about the query process and how SQL Server gets info from the database. I manage employees that work with SQL Server, but I just tell them to get the data and they pull it out. I really have never paid attention to how they pull the data out of the database. It was actually interesting to see how the query process works and how they actually pull that data out of the databases. And it was interesting to see the different versions of SQL and the evolution of Microsoft SQL Server and from where it started to where it is today. Angela, what did you learn during the project?
Well, having worked with SQL in the past, I really didn't take the time to understand the application of how it was actually getting the information from the database. I've always been the person that Kevin alluded to that just got the information out of it. I didn't go and look at all the details to figure out all the architectural layers and things of that nature. So these two projects that we've done so far have definitely been eye-openers, to say the least, as they have shown the system side, which has been very interesting to me. Matt, what have you taken away from this project?
I work exclusively with Oracle Stack, and it was interesting to see that a lot of the tools, especially in Microsoft SQL Server 2016 edition that are rolling out now, we've actually been writing Java programming to do a lot of those things to cover what Oracle can't do. So it's been interesting to really see some of the competitive technology that's out there. Shiva?
So my takeaway, I've been working in the database space for a very, very long time. Not only the RDBMS, HDBMS, logical database, I worked on that. So I should call SQL as my second language. But with this exercise, I think I've learned a lot of cool features, new features, while exploring for information on SQL Server. I was able to relate most of the features with Oracle that I deal with it every day, like Matt said. In fact, I recently, implemented some of these features, including cloud, the always on, similar technology on Oracle front. More importantly, I should say, I've learned more about the team members, the team dynamics, and the way we work. And I believe I've adapted to it and will continue to do so. Now, with that, we'll open up for any questions that you may have for us, Professor.
Okay, doke. Nice job. I especially I liked the conclusion there. I like to be able to get a little bit of feedback from you in terms of what you learned and all that. That's interesting, because I think a lot of you guys, you do have practical experience. You're using these things, and so when you can bring that to the table, that's great. I guess some of my general questions are, how would you relate a database like SQL Server to MySQL? Well, you kind of made a comparison to Oracle, and that's certainly one of the other big players in the marketplace. But what about something like MySQL? How do you think it compares to that?
My takeaway on that is MySQL, if I'm not mistaken, that's an open database, open source database. Again, it has got its own drawbacks and features, advantages, I should say. It's, when it comes to cost, ease of use, I think MySQL will be right up there. this is a similar comparison that we did with Apache to any other web servers. In case of any issues, any troubleshooting, you don't have anybody to just lean on. You have to rely on the external entities. So I would say again, based on the technology, the application sensitivity, I think it will be my recommendation to wisely use the choice of MySQL versus any other advanced databases like the SQL Server or established databases like SQL Server or Oracle.
Okay. Anybody else?
Well,
I think when I was researching it, one of the
definitely
things-
doesn't come with the business intelligence and the cloud add-ons that Microsoft SQL Server comes with. If you look into YouTube a little bit, they've got demo videos of Microsoft SQL Server databases feeding directly into Azure business analytics systems, and it becomes an incredibly powerful tool when you combine all of that. And MySQL is great for what it does, but it can't deliver that kind of all-around power.
Okay. Mr. Billings, you started to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to, he mentioned something, I was just going to tie into Microsoft and the Azure cloud and how you can tie that into web-based and you can have a highly availability all the time with using a product like SQL Server with MySQL being an open source. The availability of that high availability in the cloud-based version is probably not as standard as it is with the Microsoft backing in the SQL Server realm.
Okay. One other question I had, and this is probably a good group to ask this question of, since it seems like we've got some familiarity with Oracle and with MySQL, or excuse me, SQL Server. Compare and contrast the idea between somebody who designs and develops databases to a database administrator.
Well, in my idea, a database administrator is the one that kind of makes sure that it's running at peak performance. Whereas the person that actually designs your database is the one that gets in there, meets with the users, looks at what information is going to be held in what tables, and kind of comes up with a structure to where it's going to be in a third normal form to where that it will run at peak capacity.
Okay.
In my professional experience, I've seen the job title as interchangeable as Lego blocks, but when you speak to people who are trained to be database designers and architects versus somebody who's just a database administrator, you can tell that they have a deeper understanding of how all of the different data objects interact with each other in the system itself, if they've been doing architecture and design versus, well, we just need to optimize this query so that the search returns faster.
Okay. Very good.
So in an established companies where there are clear segregation of duties, I think database administrators, they play a vital role in making sure that the right people have the right access. Except for an application, nobody should have an DML or DDI, access. You can manipulate the data. The other activity they take care of is the backups, making sure when there is an always technology on, the sync up is properly happening. Whereas when you look at the architecture, they're involved in part of the discussion when the requirement actually starts. They start looking at the data, they're gathering, they look at the requirements and see the underlying data, and then they structure the whole database. And then in the space where I come from, the application that I support, it's a vendor supported product. The DBA has no clue on what the architecture looks like and what the tables and views are, but they ensure that the application is up and running and fine with the necessary access, user controls, the security is all in place. So that's the clear distinguish from my side.
Okay. Well, very good. That was a very good presentation. I appreciate it. Like I said, I enjoyed that last little bit, kind of hearing your experiences with some of the little things that you might have picked up. Last little things I want to leave you with, be sure and submit that assignment so I can score the rubric. be sure and fill out the peer evaluations so that I can give you guys feedback on that. And I will try to get the videos posted here in just a little while. I've got one more presentation at 3, so after that time I'll get them posted. And probably doesn't interest you that much, but I need to get them transcribed and all that kind of stuff too. So I'll be doing that the rest of the day and tomorrow. So other than that, are there any questions or anything like that?
No.
Okay, good deal. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.